We can change the world.
Then let's go catch a spider.
Hi, welcome to The Damn Right Show. I'm Adam, and today we'll be looking at 2014's The Amazing Spider-Man 2, directed by Mark Webb. No relation to spiders. There are two sides of the aisle over what the worst Spider-Man films are, not including the old Japanese kaiju versions. It's usually between The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3. You can probably tell which side of the aisle I'm falling towards. This is one of the only two movies that I've ever been in the cinema, and within a few minutes I was thinking, oh my god, what have they done? It was this and Star Wars The Last Jedi, which we'll get to one day. First, let's have a little look at some background at how this franchise came about. Spider-Man 3 was a particularly tumultuous experience in getting made. Director Sam Raimi of the original three Spider-Man films wanted to use the symbiote suit, but he didn't necessarily want to lean on the idea of Venom. The studios pushed for Venom to be included. The film itself had a lot of problems. It had its tonal shifts which were a little haywire. It suffered from the use of too many villains, and more importantly to me, it retconned the Spider-Man origin, which was pretty shameful in terms of destroying a character's motivation. See later on in this film as well. But despite all of that, Sam Raimi still wanted to press forward with the Spider-Man 4, which would have had Anne Hathaway in it, and it would have had the Vulture as the main villain. But Sony had some other ideas. Sony went towards the idea of rebooting the franchise, with Mark Webb helming it. It had Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, had Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy, who was played as Bryce Dallas Howard in the previous version. It also had Sally Field playing as Aunt May. So it was really under a microscope by fans immediately, mostly because of the quick turnaround and the loyalty they had to the prior franchise of this. So they were fighting against the current automatically. Peter Parker is supposed to be bookish, shy, he's supposed to be able to blend into a background, nobody's supposed to think anything of him, whereas this version of Peter Parker is handsome, he's athletic, he's popular, he's charismatic. Now he plays as a great version of Spider-Man, because those are the traits that Spider-Man has, but there needs to be that duality between Peter Parker and Spider-Man that just doesn't really exist in this version. Having said that, the movie was okayishly received. It was an enjoyable romp. Again, it suffered from over-familiarity and just the idea of franchise loyalty that people had to the prior set of films. So then came the announcement of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Additions to the cast included Paul Giamatti as Rhino, Jamie Foxx as Electro, Dane DeHaan as Harry Osborn, and Chris Cooper as Norman Osborn. So fans were a little skittish at the idea that there's the potential of 4 villains being introduced into this film. As well as that, the cast list revealed that Felicity Jones was going to play as Felicia Harding, a character who would then become Black Cat later on in Spider-Man canon, as well as BJ Novak playing as Alistair Smythe, who is of the Spider Slayers fame. As it turns out though, the latter two additions to the cast really don't play that important of a part, and then you've got the idea of Norman Osborn being included. He dies before he gets out of bed. If only Harry Osborn had come in with a magical golden ticket, perhaps he would have skipped out of bed, Grandpa Joe style. The movie itself starts with a flashback showing how Peter's parents were super spies, super scientists in a very I don't know why you're doing this kind of action sequence, and then it's quickly followed up by Peter chasing down the pre-mechanized Rhino, played by Paul Giamatti, and it's when you hear Paul Giamatti screaming in his fake Eastern Bloc accent where I really fell back into the oh no kind of feeling. I knew it was going to be a rough trip from that point on. One of the highlights of the movie, of both movies in fact, is the Andrew Garfield and Stone relationship, the chemistry they have. Garfield and Stone, attorneys at law, are a gem to watch on screen together. This film relies a little too much on the ups and downs, the backs and forths, the ons, the offs of the relationship. When Gwen Stacy announces that she could be getting a scholarship to a UK university, knowing Gwen Stacy's history as most Spider-Man fans do, we knew she wasn't going to be making it out of this movie alive anyway. And an interesting note is that Shailene Woodley from the Divergent films, she was actually announced and cast and on set to do some scenes as future love interest Mary Jane Watson. Her scenes were then cut because they felt that she would be a little distracting from the core relationship that we're here to see between Gwen and Peter. It's kind of a mess to think that it actually got to the stage where she was cast and on set for scenes before they realised it was a bad idea. Jamie Foxx is always fantastic. His portrayal of Max Dillon, the soon-to-be Electro, is almost like making fun of people with mental disabilities, because there's certainly something wrong with Max Dillon. It's hard to really put your finger on what it is that's wrong with him. And on top of that, there's the idea that absolutely everybody in the film seems to hate it. I will give it credit though, the idea of when Electro becomes Electro, he looks really cool. I didn't like his suit that he gets in the latter part of the film. Much would have preferred the campy comic book cartoon version of the suit. The only hints that we get at that is a birthday cake which he has bought for himself. Who is this guy? And then there's a really cool kind of sequence happening in Times Square in New York, which is one of the highlights of the film. Meanwhile, across town, Harry Osborn is getting to grips with his superpower. His superpower being that of suffering from a genetic disease that his dad told him about moments before he died, and then suddenly he is being afflicted by all of a sudden. The disease itself, microdermic hyperplasia, or whatever it's called, seems to come and go. Sometimes he looks really bruised, sometimes it looks like he's got lesions all over him, other times he looks really fresh-faced. I'm not sure if that's the same illness that he's dealing with, or maybe it's a little something else. I'm certainly not HIV positive, what it is. But along those same lines, Peter then reconnects with him and they re-establish the firm friendship that they've had all along, ? Because obviously Spider-Man's world isn't small enough. So the two characters separately discover that Peter's parents worked for Oscorp and they were working on a cure through spiders, obviously, to try and find the cure for Norman Osborn's ailment. They were all fine with it until they realised that Norman was also going to use it to make super soldiers or some such bullshit. Although when Peter discovers that his dad had a secret underground subway layer that can only be accessed by tokens for whatever reason, he discovers that his dad fastened the Parker DNA to the spider so it would only work with them, hence why Peter Parker becomes Spider-Man, because his world isn't small enough, obviously. So Harry doesn't know that Peter is Spider-Man, and when Harry does meet Spider-Man, he politely asks for his property back in the form of a vial of blood. Reverse engineer that blood sample to create the cure that his father was originally trying to get made. Peter, Spider-Man, says no because he's worried that it will kill him, or worse, for whatever reason. So it's happy enough to cause voluntary manslaughter, because it's kind of like, hey, if you give me this blood, there's a chance I could die, there's a chance I could live. If you don't give me the blood, I will 100% die. And Peter's just like, I still don't like those odds. I think Harry's got a right to be mad, to be honest. So after Harry is basically told to get wrecked by Superman, Spider-Man, similar names, we go to Electro, who is being tortured by Hermann Goering for whatever reason, and then Harry decides that he is going to use Electro to team up with him in order to beat Spider-Man, also control New York's electric grids, because they need that too, because he's electric. So after Spider-Man mercilessly executes Electro, and Gwen Stacy happens to be there as well because it's the finale time, Harry Osborn appears less dressed like the Green Goblin, more like a dirty troll doll. The raw version of the spider serum that he's taken seems to have done havoc on his gums and has made his hair go all. In the ensuing kerfuffle, Gwen Stacy eats shit and is gonzo. So it's in the PostFinal Battle where this movie gets really strange. It was no secret that Sony wanted this to be the face that launched 1,000 ships, namely in 4 key movies: The Amazing Spider-Man 3, it would have been the Sinister Six spin-off movie, Black and Silver, Silver and Black, one of the two, with Black Cat and Silver Sable being the 2 leads, and a prequel film with Aunt May being a super spy. Sit on that for a little bit. So to lean towards the Sinister Six movie, Harry Osborn's having a little chat in his jail cell with that strange, mysterious man from pretty much the exact same scene from the previous movie. He tells him that all he needs to create the Sinister Six, without mentioning the name, is to go to Oscorp where they have the technology for it. We then see a scene where there's the accoutrements of some of the Sinister Six. Doc Ock's claws, his tentacles, the Vulture's wings, as well as the Rhino's suit. Keep an eye on the Rhino's suit because it also has an extra power, not on the label, which is changing size indiscriminately or for whatever the scene needs it to be. Now, the real problem that I have with this whole scene is the idea that the Sinister Six are typically 6 separate villains that come together with a united goal. Let's beat Spider-Man, or let's rob a bank, or something like that. In this version of it, it's the idea that, hey, we've built these suits, let's find some people, put them in them, I guess. So Doc Ock, Otto Octavius, will probably get the tentacle suit because his name sounds similar to an octopus. Well, I guess that's how I kind of wrote it originally, but it doesn't fly as well. Speaking of which, why do these suits have so many different powers? Why isn't there super ones? Why not have 6 suits with matching powers instead of 6 separate ones? To see one of these in action, they break out Paul Giamatti's Rhino character and give him the mecha suit, which is just bizarre, because why would you give a multi-million, maybe multi-billion dollar tech to a character with a proven track record of getting arrested and caught and beaten by Spider-Man? It sounds like a self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it? I'd give it to the criminal that hasn't been caught. Or a guy that knows how to ride it. There are 2 alternate endings as well it's also worth making note of. One is at Gwen Stacy and her dad's gravesite. Peter meets his dad, who turns out to be alive, which messes with the whole idea of Spider-Man's origins being an orphan living with his aunt now that his dad's there. Presumably it's going to be the third film would have been some type of Sirius Black kind of, oh yeah, it's me, you can live with me, oh, but something's stopping us from you living with me. The other alternate ending is when the mysterious man further goes into Oscorp and he sees the head of Norman Osborn, the severed head in a jar, presumably to make him not the Green Goblin, maybe Arnim Zola, maybe Krang from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So there it was, in my opinion, the worst Spider-Man film available from a theatrical release. Interested to know what you thought about it. I mean, the film was a financial success, but ultimately the bigwigs at Sony had to really put a pin on 4 different movies, if not more, down the pipeline. And the next time we saw Spider-Man was the marriage between Marvel and Sony to create Captain America Civil War and the Tom Holland franchise of Spider-Man films, which are just excellent in general. It hasn't shied away Sony from continuing with solo Spider-Man ideas. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the animated feature, and the version of Venom that they have, which is a real 50-50 affair, where they've decided to just remove all traces of Spider-Man from it. So they don't know what they're doing, but they're keeping the cards. So who knows? So I'm interested to know what you think about the Amazement of Spider-Man 2. Sound off in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.